next lecture, which is to be taken by Dr. Sonia Malik. I think she needs no introduction. We all know her very well. She has seen an IVF specialist par excellence. She's been teaching DNB students and fellows, and she is the director of and head of the Department of South End Fertility and IVF Center, and she is represented IFS, IMS, and I think Foxy in various capacities, and won many awards. So the experts for this session, she's going to speak on genital tuberculosis. And the experts are going to be Dr. S.N. Basu, who's the head of the Department of Max Super Speciality Hospital in Shalimar Bagh. Dr. J.B. Sharma could not be contacted, so he's probably not joining us. Dr. Jyoti Bali, who's heading the Baby Soon IVF Center in Karol Bagh. Dr. Shivani Sachdev Gaur, I think she's everybody knows her. She's the founder and director of SCI Healthcare and SCI IVF Center. And I think Dr. Jyoti Malik also would not be joining because she has to attend another webinar. So probably she would not also join us. So Dr. Tarini. Dr. Tarini is there. Yeah, Dr. Tarini represents Muzaffarnagar. She has a Taneja ENT and IVF center in Muzaffarnagar. So probably we'll start the session. Yeah. Ma'am has joined. Dr. Sonia. Yeah. Good afternoon, ma'am. Have you joined? Dr. Sonia.
No problem. I'm there.
डॉक्टर सोनिया
मैडम आप बात करो क्या चक्कर है उनके साथ
गुड इवनिंग डॉक्टर शारदा प्लीज गुड
अच्छा ओके प्लीज
मैम हैव जॉइन या
शेयर द स्क्रीन
आई विल शेयर मैंने 5 बजे ही बोला था 1 सेकंड
मैडम द ग्रीन बटन दैट्स राइट
yes I am looking for my slide.
नमस्कार डॉक्टर सोनिया मैम नमस्कार
ji. Hi Tarini. I haven't met you after you took over as president. Congratulations.
Thank you so much ma'am. Need your blessing support
of course always.
Okay.
Just a minute now. Okay, sorry. So first of all a very good evening to all of you and thank you very much for having me here, and I apologize profusely for this delay. I was in another webinar and that is the reason I had requested for a late entry. Anyway, we are talking about tuberculosis and infertility, and Seema did tell me that you want to know about the latest developments in treatment. However, a little bit of revision and then we shall take it up. We all know that it is a global problem and we are always tackling it and causing a really distress by it, and we also know that 45% of the cases are being treated in the private sector in India. That is very important because the great burden is being met by all of us here in the private sector. Genital tuberculosis has always been a diagnostic dilemma, and because basically it is a masquerader and we all know that it causes a lot of problem where diagnosis is concerned. So therefore, the incidence is variable in various studies depending upon what method has been used to diagnose it. And therefore, there is an incidence of about 10% in the early where we were using only the histopathology. And when it has gone on to PCR, now we are looking at about 30 to 40% cases also as having genital tuberculosis. However, the more important thing is that in an early report of even 1990, Dr. Tripathi states that 25% of the cases of pulmonary tuberculosis will have an coexisting genital tuberculosis, which is something which we need to be careful about because that is a large chunk of patients. And more importantly, also we need to understand that around 4 to 9% of men also with infertility will have a clinical diagnosis of either obstructive azoospermia and male genital tuberculosis as well. So we are very blessed now that in 2016, the Index TB guidelines came out from the Government of India, and we now have definitions of extrapulmonary tuberculosis, of which genital tuberculosis forms a part. And the case definitions are, what is the presumptive extrapulmonary tuberculosis? These are patients who need to be investigated for genital TB, for instance, menstrual disturbances, infertility, teomasis, etc. What are the confirmed cases where the presumptive cases have any laboratory tests which are positive? For instance, AFB smear, culture histopathology, or laparoscopy if it has positive findings. Definitive tuberculosis is said to be present if on laparoscopy you find tubercles, caseation, or beaded tubes, and they have to be treated with ATT. Tissue specimens that are obtained from the endometrium, peritoneal wash, fluid, and biopsy from the suspicious site can be taken to help with the diagnosis. This is what is written in the guidelines. What is probable tuberculosis then? The presumptive cases where there is no microscopic or histopathological confirmation, but there is a strong clinical suspicion. So this is basically presumptive. This is what we are generally facing with infertility. Majority of our patients are presumptive because there is a suspicion, but there is nothing to confirm it. Laparoscopy suggestive of the presence of straw-colored fluid in the pouch of Douglas can be suggestive or probable tuberculosis, but not until it is proven. Laparoscopy suggestive of extensive dense pelvic and peritubal peri-ovarian adhesions, hydrosalpinx, tubo-ovarian mass, etc., excluding other diseases, and in the absence of prior treatment of TB. No treatment of TB should have been taken earlier. Such a patient would also be labeled as tuberculosis, probable tuberculosis. A positive PCR with laparoscopic findings like flimsy adhesions, etc., will be treated as probable tuberculosis, but it does not have definitive signs. What is a cured patient? If initially diagnosed by microscopy, histopathology, with negative respective tests at the end of the treatment, is considered as cured. If initially diagnosed with laparoscopic findings suggestive of active tuberculosis, again, a negative relook laparoscopy will be considered as cured. And of course, if there is resolution of the clinical symptoms, the patient is considered to be cured. Now, what are our concerns as gynecologists, and what do we do to define our evidence-based medicine? Now, we all know that, it is rarely smear positive. And of course, there is since there is no contagious potential, the TB programs have not paid great attention to this form of extrapulmonary tuberculosis. However, we need to understand, and that is where our physicians are many times in disagreement with us, because they do not understand the action of the reproductive system. However, with the coronavirus being here and with so much of interest being generated in immunology now, we probably, all of us, would be better understanding this disease, which is a chronic infection, and it is actually it is actually lying dormant in our bodies because of a strong immune reaction in our body. So I think all of this we have to understand. And so a great example of this, which is actually stated by this person in 2008, you see, for us, if a tube is fibrosed, she's gone forever. But if the lung is fibrosed in a small part and scarring is happening in a small little lesion over there, a granuloma forms and it shuts off the lesion, the pulmonologist is happy because at least the disease is contained in that little part. But for us, if the tube is gone, it is gone. So that part has to be kept in mind. And hence, we do understand that there is a great need to recognize the early stages and try and target the treatment of infertility based on whatever we can have at early stages. So the dilemmas again are that in order to better our results, we are basing our treatment on the new molecular tests like TB-PCR. But at the same time, we also know that there is a lot of criticism about the TB-PCR samples. They may be picking up dead bacilli, and hence we know that they may be of some little value. However, there is also great variation in the results because of the sample, because many a times when we send the same sample to two labs, we find different results in them. So therefore, TB is a great masquerader, and we really need to be alert as far as TB is concerned, and need to really understand the question, the ethical question, that should we be putting our patient on anti-tubercular treatment based on these results, where we do not know whether we should be putting them really on this kind of prolonged treatment just on the basis of suspicion. So what are the facts about tuberculosis? There is not a single sign or symptom that is pathognomonic. There is no single test which is definitive. And there are many types of species that can infect the humans. There is a Delhi variety, there is a chinnite variety. So there are so many forms of tuberculosis also. It's not just one mycobacterium, it has mutated so much. So they live in latency by causing immune modulation in the body of the host. And the bacteria can also change themselves in order to escape the onslaught of antibacterials. That is why, despite such a great vaccination program, which has been going on for so many years, we have still not been able to eradicate this disease. So as far as we are concerned, we have to understand that the reproductive system the genital tract has got two functions, the reproductive and the endocrine. And the endocrine function actually locally supports the reproduction, and systemically, it supports many functions in many organs and systems. So it's actually this we are bothered about, because if the reproductive system, or if the hormones, the estrogen and progesterone, are also affected, then what is going to happen to the various functions that it performs in the body? That is something that we are getting to know of about tuberculosis. So it can actually affect both these functions. It causes structural changes, and it also causes functional changes in so many organs. So tuberculosis can cause infertility by changing the anatomy, the physiology, and the immunology with signs and symptoms, and it can be silent as well. So you may have nothing, and yet she may be having tuberculosis. What is the patient profile that you might get in these patients? In the female, we all know this very well, that these are the various signs that we might get, types of patients: infertility, miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, chronic pelvic pain, menstrual irregularity, and adnexal mass. And in the male, you get these things: infertility, a scrotal swelling, repeated urine infections, even with pus cells, sterile on culture, and prostatitis and epididymitis. You may have all this here in the male as well. And what is the organ involvement? If it is a vulvovaginal involvement, then you will get a swelling, ulcer, and discharge. If it is a cervix, then it is erosion, nodule, and hypertrophy. If it is the uterus, then Seineke and Asherman syndrome. Tubes, we all know: salpingitis, hydrosalpinx, and pyosalpinx. In the ovary, it is oophorytis and teomas. This is something which has come up recently, and we all know that tuberculosis affects the ovarian reserve. Abdominal peritoneal adhesions are leading to a frozen pelvis. In the male, which we don't talk about much, but we should know, and yes, it forms a large part of infertility practice also. In the urethra, there is soreness and stricture. In the penis, there is ulcer, swelling, purulent discharge, epididymitis, which may be nodular, fibrosed, there may be sinuses, testicular swelling, hydrocele, fistula, prostate and seminal vesicles, definitely prostatitis, which just doesn't go. One after the other sample is always having pus cells, but there is nothing over there. And of course, the prostate is tender and tough. So these are some of the symptoms with which people may present to us, and we have to deal with the infertility. So how do you diagnose all this? We know that we always say कि हमें suspicion है, but look at the number of tests, number of symptoms that have been described by people, which may actually indicate that this person may be having some kind of a tubercular infection somewhere in her body, but they may not be present. So some of the common signs and symptoms, of course, we start from the asymptomatic, but we also have these symptoms like pyrexia, malaise, etc. And of course, related to or pertaining to the female genital tract, menstrual symptoms, we all are very familiar with that. In the male, I'm stressing on the male again and again, because this is something that we need to understand, and we do get patients. So painful ulcers, pyuria, hematuria, dysuria, loss of libido, fistulas, culture, sterile pyospermia, and infertility, oligospermia, obstructive and non-obstructive azoospermia. So these patients, we know that male infertility is on the rise, and I'm sorry I missed Dr. Sharma's lecture. I'm sure he must have enlightened you on all this, but yes, that needs to be taken care of as well. And the signs, as you all know, we are very familiar with this. In the male, they can present with any of these signs also. So this is a picture of the epididymoarchitis intense, where there is this ulcer, and on ultrasound, you find this vascularity over there. And of course, you find granulomatous inflammation in the male if the patient is coming to you with this kind of problem. Generally, he goes to the urologist or a male physician. People like this don't come to us. Clinical examination signs are basically, this was actually defined very well by Dr. Wadia. He was a professor in Grant in Mumbai, and he was supposed to be smelling tuberculosis, just like Dr. Takkar from All India Institute a couple of years ago. She was supposed to be smelling tuberculosis, and so also he, always on the lookout for tuberculosis, and therefore he gave all these signs of local signs of tuberculosis in the form of these various types of uteri, which if you see there, then you should think that this patient might be having tuberculosis. This was his oration which he gave in the Tuberculosis Society of India in 1996, and it is found on the net. You can find all these symptoms over there. And also the list of investigations that we have are plenty. We know that we can diagnose tuberculosis by doing any of these tests, but our problem is how to collate the findings of these tests and then for sure say that this patient is actually tuberculosis. That is where we are boggled, and that is where we really don't know what to do. But however, endometrial biopsy, histopathology definitely, AFB culture, which may be AFB in the menstrual blood, not only that, culture and PCR, and of course these supportive tests that we have, which might prove to us. So again, I refer to Dr. Wadia. Again, he has very nicely elaborated these findings where you can say with some kind of confidence that this patient may be having tuberculosis. And of course, we know from our many friends in India now who are such good endoscopic surgeons. This is a slide from Dr. Patel from Ahmedabad, and you can see this biliary tuberculosis in this picture, and of course the scarring of the uterus on the hysteroscopy picture. So on the hysteroscopy, again, microcaseation may be found, hyperplasia and atrophy of the endometrium, exudation, a funnel entrance to the tubal ostium, canalization of the ostial area releases caseous material in some cases. I will show you that. Irregular ulcerated endocervical canal, fleshy and hyperplastic erosion, and synechian fibrosis of the uterine cavity. So here is some endoscopic evidence of PCR. And look at this. This is a husband-wife team from Jaipur. Kumar, Alka and Arun Kumar, they have published a lot of papers in various journals, all international journals. And this is a moth-eaten appearance of tuberculosis. And this is after the relook surgery, and the same patient was done after ATT. So you can see over here that this patient has responded very well to the ATT. Hence, definitely it proves that it was tuberculosis. Similarly here, again, you can see the difference, but of course, they have tried to define the intraluminal adhesions also by really going into the ostia. So therefore, all kinds of workers from our country are doing a very, very good work and publishing now to make people believe that yes, tuberculosis definitely exists. A very good slide from Dr. Ashok Khurana. Again, this is a broken endometrium with minor endometritis, irregular thin endometrium, not conforming to the period of the menstrual cycle. And of course, it is showing that it is not responding to the hormones as well. So such a patient must be suspected of tuberculosis. And of course, also you may find that there is in a little severer case or in Asherman syndrome, you find calcification and fibrosis, where when you put this patient to hysteroscopy, you will find lots of adhesions over there. So all these added tests are actually, they are not going to show you, they may not show you the bacillus as such, but all these signs are actually just making your suspicion, a firm belief that these patients are actually tuberculosis. So ultrasound findings of an adnexal mass, hydrosalpinx, fluid in the POD, adhesions in the pelvis, probe tenderness if it is acute, broken, irregular, indistinct endometrium, and all these things which we are day-to-day seeing when we are doing our infertility practice. So what about the male? Again, this is from Ashok's lab only, and you can see over that they have found all these things like I showed you in the findings. There is a very nice review article written from AIIMS, again about male tuberculosis, and you can see over here the dilated seminal vesicles and the calcification, as you can see over here in the testes. So all this actually tells us that there is male partner also suffering from it. So what is the management in such cases? Establish a diagnosis, look at the extent of disease, and look at any cofactors. So, but again, we come back to the same thing, our diagnostic dilemma, and what is the compliance of the patient and toxicity of the drugs. So there are no firm answers, but of course there is a clarity which is emerging, and we all know now that today we are not supposed to put any patient on treatment on the sole positive PCR. There has to be additional proof, either in the history, physical findings, and other investigations, in order to label a patient as having tuberculosis. And I would refer now to the immunology of tuberculosis in order for us to understand what PCR is telling us. So if you look at this slide, this is very recent. This is an article which was published in 2010, and this is from Flynn and Chan. And basically, it tells us that tuberculosis is like also existent in the body, very much like HIV. There are different stages or in its presence in the body, and that is determined, number one, by the immune reaction of the body and the viral and the tubercular load. So if the infection is rampant, it is very heavy, and the bacterium is very, very toxic, then the patient is going to present with clinical disease, and the immune reaction that the person mounts is very poor. Patient will have clinical disease. However, when the infection is mild, or infection was lying subdued or inside the body and it has just started to erupt, in such cases, the innate immune response of the body takes action, and it is not going to get activated at all. So therefore, depending upon the innate immunity and the acquired immunity which you get after the BCG injection, the patient can actually eliminate the disease when it is in its beginning, or when it is very little. The load of the bacteria is very little. However, if the bacterial load is very high and the immunity of the patient is very, very low, then the active infection takes place, and finally it leads to the disease. Hence, we have to understand that when we are doing the PCR, it could be present in the quiescent infection. That means when it is lying dormant. It could be present in active infection, and it could be present in disease. However, having said that, then we only have to treat the infection and the disease. We are not supposed to treat the quiescent disease because it's not causing any harm to the patient. It's lying dormant. And that is what is being misunderstood as dead. We do not know whether this bacteria is lying dormant or it is actually dead, because the PCR is going to be positive even in a dormant condition. It may not necessarily be dead. That is something that we need to understand. So what are the conditions where a latent infection can therefore become active? What are the risk factors? And you can see over here that there are so many factors, including pregnancy and our aim to get a patient pregnant. When we are doing an IVF or when we are doing infertility treatment, we are trying to make the patient pregnant, and that is one factor wherein the latent infection can get activated, because the immune system of the woman is downregulated. Hence, what are the recommendations now? What do we do? This I have told you. And we have to actually look at the AFP culture and peritoneal fluid for that. And of course, then look what is the solution? How are we going to decide whether this bacteria is alive or dead, and what should we be doing? So the research priority, therefore, is to understand this spectrum that I've talked about, and basically to see whether we have any test or marker available which will tell us that this PCR is positive and this patient is now in its quiescent stage, and this one is positive and it is going to be harmful to the patient. So I refer to this test, and this is basically very recent. This IGRA has been developed basically to understand what we are going to do in the cytokines. Now, we all know that the two cytokines that are very, very aggressive and active in tuberculosis is IL-2 and interferon gamma. These are the two test cytokines where they are secreted by the Th1 lymphocytes, and based upon their activity, we can know whether this disease is actually active or it is latent. So here I refer to this, what I have written over here. It has been shown that IL-2 and interferon gamma secreted by antigen-specific T cells change according to the different TB infection status. That means that the number of IL-2 secreting T cells were more in latent tuberculosis, and indicating that IL-2 might serve as an appropriate biomarker. But if the interferon gamma is higher, then it is active. Latent IL-2, interferon gamma active. So here is this test, which is called the Fluorospot assay. This is actually developed. It is not available in the country as yet, but this is just to show if this is positive, if we are having the IL-2 positive, then we are thinking of it as being a latent disease. However, if the interferon gamma is positive, then this patient is moving towards. So here, if you find both of them being positive, then the patient is moving towards an active disease from a latent disease. So therefore, it will actually tell us which patient to treat and which patient we can hold on, because she is having the dormant bacteria, but she doesn't need treatment. We also tried to look at the cytokine profiles many years ago in 2004 and presented this paper in 2004. And we actually looked at the cytokine profiles, and we also found that the TNF alpha and interferon gamma were quite high in patients who were non-tubercular, and the maximum were in the infertility group. Recurrent pregnancy loss did not have so much of inflammation. They did have, but they did not have as much inflammation as these patients. So I think, again, I'm referring to Corona. Corona is actually making us understand inflammation better now. So we know that all patients do not react the same way to inflammation. Some have a very strong inflammatory or immune response, whereas the others may not have the same kind of response. Some of these, now the new tests which we are developing, and all of us are now very much aware of chronic endometritis, and we are looking for that. So chronic endometritis is also seen as a cytokine, a test, immune test, a marker, which comes under the name CD138 stain. And again, over here, it is actually to detect the plasma cells as we do in histopathology. So if the CD138 is positive, it indicates that this endometrium is having some kind of endometritis, chronic endometritis. So plasma cells are an indicator. They may not be a granuloma, but if there are plasma cells, if your histopathologist is able to pick up plasma cells on histopathology, very good. Otherwise, this stain, immunohistochemistry stain with CD138 as a marker, is indicative of chronic endometritis. And if this patient also has a PCR positive, then it is sure that this is tuberculosis. So endometritis, again, with PCR may help you to diagnose it. So 25% of the cases will have chronic endometritis. And we all know that one of the labs, Iviomics, is now also doing this chronic endometritis in a large way. But our own labs also have started to tell us whether this patient has chronic endometritis or not. And this is a very beautiful paper that has been published from Dr. B.N. Chakravarti's unit, where they have looked at all the markers, all the inflammatory markers and cytokines in patients who are coming to them as tuberculosis based on PCR positive, and they looked at all these integrins, LIF, etc., and they found that all of them are insufficient. And to the extent, they also looked at the pinopodes on electron microscopy, and they found that during the phase of endometrial receptivity or implantation, the pinopode formation was very, very bad. Look at this endometrium. It does not look like an endometrium which is going to give rise to a pregnancy. Hence, they found that in these latent genital tuberculosis patients, there were poorly developed pinopodes in majority of them. So therefore, these tests are actually, and these are all correlations with PCR. So all these tests are actually telling us that we are not very wrong. The only thing is we need to understand which patient is actually requiring treatment and which is not. And for that, we do await these tests which are going to differentiate between the true ones and the wrong ones. And this is a paper from Dr. Neena Malhotra, Dr. Sunita Mittal's unit, and from AIIMS, and where they showed that in all these patients who are having latent genital tuberculosis, and they found that their blood flows were much hampered. The perifollicular Doppler flows showed that they were bad, and we all know that the endometrium in these patients show very poor blood flow, and of course high resistance flow in the uterine artery also, when we are trying to do IVF in them. So such patients also can actually indirectly tell you that this is tuberculosis. So if we make an algorithm of what we need to do, we may be having active and dormant. We may be having a symptomatic patient or an asymptomatic patient. Symptoms, of course, we know, but asymptomatic, can be present in this form, where there is recurrent implantation failure, also past TB history, family history, etc., or just a chance discovery on investigations. You don't have anything and she's silent, and suddenly you find that there is. So only to treat, we have to confirm the diagnosis by doing many more investigations, like I have elaborated, but only treat if there is only one, more than one test positive. Do not treat only on the basis of PCR. Now, again, what are the investigations? There is a whole battery of investigations as we have described, but only the ones over here that we have marked red are the ones where you will definitely consider it as positive. PCR alone is not positive, but if it is substantiated with laparoscopy and hysteroscopy, yes, PCR can also be taken as positive, and then you start the patient on ATT. Otherwise, based only on AFB culture, you can, but not only on PCR. So what are the treatments that we have? We have the medical treatment, we have surgical, and we have ART, 3 forms of treatment we know. And we know that medical treatment needs to be given to nearly all our patients, whether we are doing surgery or whether we are doing ART. However, surgery is definitive. We have to do it in certain specific cases. And more importantly, what we need to understand now about the treatment, I will go into the detail a little longer. The genital tuberculosis is a notifiable disease. All of us must understand, if you find a patient of tuberculosis, then you have to notify it to the government. Medical management, WHO guidelines for treatment for a new patient or for an MDR, if we think she's an MDR, is basically different. And therefore, you can see this chart from WHO guidelines. The Index TV guidelines has this chart, and it can be taken as an indicator whenever you're prescribing medicine. What is more important is there a change in the treatment guidelines for a new patient or a previously treated patient? So if you have a new patient, then you have the standard regime for 4 drugs in the first 2 months and then 3 drugs in the next 4 months, so a total of 6 months. However, if the patient has already taken a course of ATT and yet you are thinking that she is tubercular, so in such patients, the recommendations are that you add streptomycin to it. To the 4 drugs, you add streptomycin and then follow it up for 1 month extra with the 4 drugs. So instead of 2 months, you're actually giving active management for 3 months now, with 5 drugs in the first 2 months and 4 drugs in the last 1 month. And and the continuing phase, again, for a new patient, it is only for 4 months, 3 drugs, and for previously treated patients, it is for 5 months. Again, 3 drugs, but you have to give a longer treatment for these patients who have previously been treated for tuberculosis. This is the change in the national guidelines. So what about latent tuberculosis? Again, there have been so many methods which have been actually proposed by WHO for treating latent tuberculosis. And all this is based on IGRA, which we do not recommend in India. For us as gynecologists, all these patients whom we are thinking are latent tuberculosis, based on the PCR positivity that we are doing, basically we do not put them on one drug as is indicated by WHO. We are very comfortable trying to treat them completely as a new case of tuberculosis. So, but definitely we must know that these are the methods available for treating for latent tuberculosis. So, what is the difference in now the tuberculosis elimination program that is now present in the country? Again, I have already indicated this to you, but what is now, instead of the DOTS program that we were saying twice a week, once a week, for us, now it has to be given as a daily dose, and all the tablets are to be calculated strictly according to the weight of the patient. In the first phase, 4 drugs, like we said, and then continued with 3 drugs, written as this, as I had indicated in the chart. However, they have to receive it daily, and it is according to the body weight. And interestingly, all these are included, all these drugs are now included in a single tablet instead of the patient taking 7-8 tablets a day. Single tablet, so that the patient does not miss these tablets. That is what is now recommended by the government. And this is the app which is used for us. It is important for us to know this Nishcare, because basically this is to help us to notify the patient to the government when you detect the patient of tuberculosis. And this is basically, JEET is a joint effort for elimination of tuberculosis with the government of India and the Bill Gates Foundation. Bill Gates Foundation has actually taken up this initiative to help eliminate tuberculosis from the country. And their people, if you just rig up these JEET people from your area, they will come and do the entire thing for you. They will talk to the patient, they will see that the patient is supplied with drugs, and they will also notify the government or your area officer for the further treatment, and they will follow up with the patient also. So everything is actually followed up by these people from JEET. And also you must know that the patient as an incentive is given 1,000 rupees for the treatment. So therefore, patient is given something, and also the doctor who notifies is given something. So that part has also been taken care of by the government. So a lot of effort has gone into the elimination of tuberculosis now, and it was seemingly very popular, and it had really caught up before Corona came. Now, of course, it has taken a little bit of a hit, but of course, we hope that it is going to come back again, and I'm sure we will be able to do it. So what about surgery then? Surgery, like I said, there have been, there are patients who just they won't do well in infertility because they have a problem, and we do need to actually do something about it. Recurrent disease also, and non-healing fistulas. So basically, in the female, it is hydrosalpinx, pyosalpinx, teomases, etc. And in the males also, if there is an abscess formation, obstruction, etc., we need to treat them. So outcome of a dysbiosis is not very good. We know that if it is very severe, then patients may not do well, and we may have to opt for other methods. Tuberplasty also is not very successful in these patients, and we all know that we may have to resort to ART when after tuberplasty. So indications for ART can be for any of these factors, whether it is tubal, pelvic, ovarian even, because they have poor ovarian reserve, uterine factor and male factor. Any of these, we may have, it may be an indication for ART. And basically, if we compare the two, we need to understand if the age of the female is old, she's an older patient, it should be IVF, not tubal surgery. Status of the male partner also, if it is poor, again it is IVF, duration of infertility and extent of damage. And of course, what do you find in ART? Again, we have our own problems. We have poor ovarian reserve. They need more gonadotrophins, poor quality oocytes, poor embryos, poor endometrium, low implantation rates, and pregnancy rates. So, of course, even ART is not very good, but yes, from nothing, you still move to something. So, therefore, it is always good to offer ART to patients who need it. And of course, these are the worldwide reports of ART in tuberculosis. And this is our humble representation of 120 cases based on PCR. Dr. Firoza Parekh's pregnancy, the number of patients was based on laparoscopy and histopathology. So therefore, she has reported a lesser pregnancy rate at this point, but definitely she reports a very high pregnancy rate now, ever since they have started to do PCR. So these earlier reports are in patients. You will see that the pregnancy rate is not very heartening as compared to us, where we reached nearly the same as normal patients, where because this was detected early by PCR, and in these groups it was a histopathology or AFB culture. So remember, the mantra for tuberculosis treatment is always to detect it as early as possible and treat aggressively as possible. Third-party reproduction is always an option because oocyte donation may be required and surrogacy may be required. But again, we need to understand that this is a beautiful paper by from Dr. Chakravarti's unit again, which does tell us that even surrogacy may not give an answer, because basically, again, because of all these problems that the patient has, her oocytes may not be of good. So here are some of the reports of general treatment that has come out from the country, not IVF, but otherwise. This is a paper by Dr. Jindal, where she gave a short medical treatment followed by ART, and she reports a pregnancy rate of 31.2%. Dr. Chakravarti's unit from, again, medicine followed by ART, again, the improved results of 29.2%. So therefore, when we do this here, again, this is an old paper, 1997, from Dr. Barik, where an IVF pregnancy rate of 16.68% was reported. But if they combine treatment, you can see over here, if you combine treatment in Dr. Jindal's unit, medicine, surgery, and ART, everything was combined, and she has reported the best result. So therefore, you have to be aggressive and you have to strike at the right time in order to get good results in IVF in this. This was our old paper, which we presented in ASRM in 2007, a data of 200 patients where we considered more than 2 indicators in addition to a positive PCR. They were put on WHO regime for 9 months. I, at that time, used to give 9 months of ATT, a spontaneous pregnancy rate of 27%, and of course, an IVF pregnancy again of 27%. So therefore, we have to think tuberculosis, do the tests as we can, as much as we can, try to find out if we can find out whether it is tuberculosis. But remember, please do not put the patient on anti-tubercular treatment if you do not find any proof, because that again may make you medico-legally responsible for that, and that may create problems itself. It is notifiable and patient can take treatment free of cost from the government once it has been notified. With that, I thank you very much for your attention. And I would also want to inform all of you that recently in the Journal of US Endocrinology, I refer to that, I'll stop sharing my screen, sorry. There is a journal called US Endocrinology, where we have published 4 Indians, 4 of us have published 4 articles on tuberculosis. You have seen me quoting from there. I have written on male and female tuberculosis and infertility. Dr. Nalini Mahajan has written on the tests that we need to do for tuberculosis. Dr. Madhuri Patil has written on the endocrinology of tuberculosis and the different organs that it affects, that is the adrenals, the pancreas, other than ovaries. And the 4th one has been written by Dr. Padma, where she talks about the ovarian reserve and tuberculosis. So please refer to those articles and do read them. December 2020, very recent, and all of us are Indians. So I'm happy to tell you that you should go through this, because Seema particularly asked me, you have to present the latest. That's why I'm saying this.
Excellent. Mind-blowing, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I've taken so long, but I think I've...
It's been always a pleasure to hear you, ma'am.
Really.
No, madam. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Really amazing article, presentation always from you. People are looking forward that, you should update them from time to time on tuberculosis. One thing I think, you've amply emphasized that it is a notifiable disease. And we should take help of these ZEET people, those people do A to Z job for you. Right from the... So I think, you should take a help.
Yes, yes. Actually, ma'am, if you tell them to come, they also organize webinars for you and meetings in different areas. So I think Dr. Divya Singhal was the first one to organize it in Delhi. I went to Rohini for that meeting with Jeet. So I think it's because of the corona now that things have taken a backseat for tuberculosis. But if you contact them, then they are very happy to come and help you in any way. They will do it.
Yes, ma'am. Jeet is back. I'm Dr. Divya Singhal. They're back.
There you are. Yeah, Divya, yes. She's back. They are back? Okay, great to know that. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
They did one meeting.
Any questions, any comments from experts to make? Dr. Tarini?
Dr. Sharda Jain, I would like to talk on recurrent implantation failure also. Sometimes with tuberculosis. Sometimes. I was going to do it today, but then I said, no, I have been asked to talk on infertility, general infertility.
Right.
Because there is a lot in implantation failure also now with tuberculosis.
Yes, we will wait to listen to you, Sonia ma'am.
No.
And it was, as ever, a mesmerizing talk. I really appreciate you really today highlighted about the latent phase and active phase and the disease phase. But I just want to know one thing. What is the then advantage of PCR once we can't treat the patient on the basis of PCR? And one thing more, like government said, suppose if you found the clinical symptoms and suppose if you find on the laparoscopy, then you can treat the patient. Okay, not on the basis of PCR. So please clarify for me also. I'm a little bit confused. I'm not now advising the PCR at all. So should be advised or not?
Again, I will refer to Corona. I will actually, that is made
Okay.
life very simple because we have now understood immunology better. So again, for Corona, we are doing PCR. And PCR is a very sensitive technology. It picks up the minutest DNA. That is also happening in cases of TB. We are picking up the minutest DNA. But what is happening now, on the basis of that PCR, we are thinking that this patient is having Corona and we are treating them or whatever, we are looking at them. But yesterday, Dr. KK Agarwal has brought this up and he has sent he generally writes these mails to everybody. So I'm a part of that. And he has written very nicely that with the PCR, you must do the antigen test. If the antigen is negative, because that is testing a higher load, isn't it? If the antigen is positive only in 60%, 40% it is not positive. So if the antigen is positive and the PCR is negative, it means that and the PCR is positive, it means that it has reached a state of contagiousness. It is going to be passed on to the next person. So you have to be careful. But if only the PCR is positive and the antigen is negative, the disease is still contained. It is not going to be contagious. It is not going to be passed on. You understand? So also for us, if on laparoscopy we find the disease plus we do an PCR, we know that there is a disease for sure. We have TB. We have it because laparoscopic adhesions will be present in so many things. But if we have the PCR also positive, we knew that it is positive, but it may not be active. That is what we are trying to say. And when you are actually writing an ATT just on the basis of writing for laparoscopy, some person in our own community will say laparoscopic findings you will find even in patients of tubectomy. You will find adhesions and yet they have had 3-4 children. How will you explain it then? What is the defense that you have? But if you have a positive test with you and you have laparoscopic findings, when you're prescribing your medicine, when you're prescribing ATT to a patient, you can defend yourself. You can say that this test is positive. It is showing that there is bacteria. I don't care if it is alive or dead, but it is there and it can be activated because there is evidence to say when this patient becomes pregnant, it may be activated. So I'm treating this patient. But if you don't have it, how will you?
Ma'am, thank you so much. But in the laparoscopy, there is a beaded appearance and like cases at lesion, not only the adhesions. And I know one thing I really appreciate you, I mean, compare the corona with the, one difference is there, major difference. The coronavirus is not permanent in our body.
It is.
But the mycobacterium, once it's entered, is lifelong. It's lifelong.
That's what I'm saying. We don't know anything
So that
about
is a bigger difference in the immunology of both the things.
Yes, I agree with you because we don't know anything much about it, but I'm only comparing.
So anyway, thank you so much for that clarifying.
I'm only comparing the interpretation of the test.
I think, when you see patients of tuberculosis and when they present with infertility, you will definitely find there some symptoms are there and you're very careful on the ultrasound, you'll find, the markers is there. And, I find, when Dr. Jyoti and all say about ultrasound, the COX must be ruled out. You can take it from me, 90% it will be there. So I think, you've got to be very clear.
Absolutely.
And it has been written as far as the Z program is concerned. They very categorically say, even if everything is negative and your clinical suspicion is very high, go ahead and give. You have to only notify.
Yeah.
And basically, your symptoms also, you can get the treatment.
Whenever you are treating, madam, you just have to be very careful that you follow this now because that is going to be taken as the white paper for TB. And whatever is written over there, if you are doing it exactly according to that, nobody can catch you. You can do it. But if you are doing something which is not written over there, then you have to have additional proof to prove that. That is what.
Madam has very importantly highlighted. Can I speak, Sada ma'am? Dr. Anita here.
Very true.
I just wanted to convey this message that ma'am has highlighted the COVID made tuberculosis, a bit on the back seat. we have started getting in. I'm working in a public hospital. I have got in last 15 days, I have got 2 patients. One came ANC with discharging sinus, another with gross cervical lymphadenopathy, which turned out to be tuberculosis. So we will get more patients like this now, because they could not get the medical attention required at that particular time for initial diagnosis. So thank you, Sonia ma'am. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very
Very
much.
Thank you, sir.
enlightening,
Thank
very
you.
enlightening, Sonia
I
ma'am.
really enjoyed. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having. Thank you, madam. Thank you so much.
We are too much in this from today's talk. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you.
And waiting to listen RIF.
Whenever you say. Whenever you say.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Surya ma'am,
Thank
I
you.
want to ask one question from you and Dr. Archana Pathak. I wanted to know